On this edition for Saturday, January 16th, states brace for potential protests in the lead up to the inauguration.
I think this was the end of the beginning, and I think we're now moving into a dangerous new phase.
Capitol Hill siege, the people behind it, and the violence fermented online. Next on PBS NewsHour Weekend.
PBS NewsHour Weekend is made possible by Sue and Edgar Wachenheim III, the Anderson Family Fund, Bernard and Denise Schwartz, the Cheryl and Philip Milstein family, Barbara Hope Zuckerberg, the Leonard and Norma Chlorfine Foundation. We try to live in the moment, to not miss what's right in front of us. At Mutual of America, we believe taking care of tomorrow can help you make the most of today. Mutual of America Financial Group, retirement services and investments.
For 25 years, Consumer Cellular's goal has been to provide wireless service that helps people communicate and connect. We offer a variety of no-contract plans, and our U.S.-based customer service team can help find one that fits you. To learn more, visit consumercellular.tv.
Additional support has been provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. As the nation counts down to Inauguration Day and state capitals in Washington, D.C. lock down in advance of possible violence, President-elect Joe Biden announced more members of his incoming administration today. Mr. Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris officially introduced key members of their science team at an event in Wilmington, Delaware. In a first, Mr. Biden will elevate the director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy to a cabinet position and name geneticist Eric Lander to the post. In Washington, D.C., the National Guard and law enforcement agencies are patrolling the mostly locked down city with 4 days to go before Mr. Biden's inauguration. Up to 25,000 National Guard troops with service members from every state and territory and D.C. itself will be deployed by next week. The National Mall and 13 rail stations in the D.C. area will be closed until the day after inauguration. State capitals across the country are also increasing security after supporters of President Trump attacked the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Last night, a Virginia man was arrested at a security checkpoint near the Capitol. According to a court filing, Wesley Allen Beeler tried to use an unauthorized inauguration credential and had a loaded gun and 500 rounds of ammunition in his truck. Beeler was arrested for possession of an unregistered firearm and possession of unregistered ammunition, among other offenses, according to CNN. Today, committees of the House of Representatives opened a review of the insurrection and requested documents from federal law enforcement agencies. Dozens have been charged with crimes for participating in last week's attack on the Capitol. The FBI says it has identified at least 270 more. Some of the rioters were familiar figures to authorities, but most were unknown. And as NewsHour Weekend's Christopher Booker reports, they came from all walks of life.
While the complexion and gender of those who attacked the Capitol was overwhelmingly white and overwhelmingly male, the profiles of those responsible emerging from the growing list of arrests paints an unsettling portrait of just how wide America's hate has spread. 52-year-old Bradley Ruxtales was, until last week, a CEO of a Chicago area data and marketing company. Capitol Police arrested him for unlawful entry. 49-year-old Christine Priola, in this photo on the Senate floor, resigned from her job as an occupational therapist for Cleveland schools. And 38-year-old Cleet Keller, a two-time Olympic gold medalist, was identified by his U.S. Olympic team jacket in a video. For those who have long studied extremism, the disparate biographies indicate an ominous turn in America.
What's so frightening about what happened last week is, I would say, it represents the normalization of extremism.
For more than 100 years, the Anti-Defamation League has been fighting against hate and anti-Semitism. Jonathan Greenblatt is the CEO.
It's not great when hate is a growth business, but over the last, 5 years, the climate in this country has changed dramatically. I think the Trump presidency will be bookended, remembered by historians, starting with Charlottesville and ending with Capitol Hill. In Charlottesville, you had a hardcore group of about 150, 200 white supremacists who converged on that college town from all over the country. Flash forward to Capitol Hill, and you indeed, again, had a who's who of right-wing extremists. And yet, when those militants staged their attack on the Capitol, they burst first through the doors, but they were followed by thousands of people, teachers and firefighters and police officers and ordinary people.
Greenblatt argues the way these people followed the militants has unsettling historical analogies.
What we have here is new to the US, but certainly not that novel. This is how we've seen Islamist extremist movements develop, for example, in the Middle East. Al-Qaeda and ISIS are hardcore terror organizations, but they rely on the radicalization of ordinary people to recruit and swell their ranks. This was a watershed moment for the white supremacy movement in the United States. And they will use it to radicalize and recruit even more people. And that's why I think this is so troubling, because I don't think this was the end. I think this was the end of the beginning. And I think we're now moving into a dangerous new phase.
Does this change or alter your organization's approach?
This will certainly alter the way the ADL thinks about the problem. Our analysts have been studying extremist movements for decades and decades. But what's worrisome is we are moving into a new phase where more and more people are being radicalized and willing to do the kinds of things like commit a clear criminal activity.
Are there any historical markers that you're looking to essentially deprogram, not just the hardcore, but thinking of that group that was behind the push? How do we reach those people?
Well, I think one of the things we need to acknowledge is that what happened last week happened in the context of a very complicated a socioeconomic, cultural moment. We've seen the gap increase between the haves and have-nots. We've seen more and more jobs move overseas. We've seen COVID-19 literally demolish communities, destabilize our economy, cost millions of jobs. This all fits into a narrative where people feel really alienated and afraid. Layer on top of that, the role of the media. And I would point out social media in particular.
It is hard to understand, though, because while the economic argument and understanding has been there, the Olympic swimmer, the real estate agent, the CEO from a Chicago-based company, I can't imagine that they are living on the economic margins in the same ways that others who have been displaced by manufacturing jobs lost.
Radicalization isn't necessarily a process that happens only to a certain type of person. It may be that the out-of-work individual is more vulnerable to it. But we know from the annals of history, whether it's political Islam in the Middle East, whether it's Nazism in Germany, whether it's communism in the former Soviet Union, that intellectuals, that executives, that ordinary people can get swept up in the madness. That's literally what played out last week in Washington. So how do we fix it? I do think it's going to require a process of national healing. And before you can have unity, you will need accountability. And unless we have a full accounting for that offense, the country will never heal.
While the events at the nation's capital last week caught many by surprise, those who monitor extremism on the internet had already seen a rebellion brewing. Charlie Warzel is the New York Times opinion writer at large and reports on online radicalization.
This is a multi-year process of radicalization, of the creation of a pro-Trump media environment that basically has created a durable alternate reality. And I think we could watch this, build and get close to, reaching ahead and busting out of, the online ecosystem into real world violence. You'd seen it in some isolated incidents, but this was sort of the thing we were always really worried about.
There is the content, which is the disinformation, and then there's the platforms, which you've also reported on in great depth. How responsible are they for amplifying these mistruths in a way, and even directing people to groups that are trafficking in it?
It's not that Facebook caused this. It's not that, this is only a platform problem. This is a huge problem. There's a supply issue and a demand issue. The platforms are the part of the supply, but they meaningfully influence people and reward a certain part of their personality. And that part of the personality often tends to be extreme.
Who is most susceptible to this?
In terms of people who just fall into these conspiracies or, create this collective delusion with other people, that can just be normal individuals who, for, whatever reason, find community here in some way and find a group of people who, feel, like they're people.
Yeah. So how easy is it to fall into the rabbit hole, and how hard is it going to be to try to help someone out?
I think that we find that really one of the biggest things is this idea of community, that people find individuals who make them feel validated, who give them a reason. The QAnon conspiracy theory is really based in people, quote unquote, doing their own research. And that research is empowering. It gives people, a feeling that they are not only, part of something, but really participating and advancing that cause through their own work, which is different than a normal, news, which is passive consumption to some degree. In terms of getting out, I think it's incredibly difficult. It takes a lot of empathy and a lot of time, and it's something that really can't scale. It's something that people, in your life have to help you with. There's no video you can show a bunch of people who have been radicalized that will kind of, snap them out of it.
You've touched base with some of these people that were influencers that came to Washington, D.C. from near and far. I know it's just the people that you've talked to, but what are you hearing? What are you seeing?
The siege of the Capitol was a line in the sand for a lot of people. I think there are a number of people who are going deeper into radicalization. It is a real, it is a tent pole for them, and it's something that they're going to, latch onto. But I do think for other people, they saw this and they were disgusted by it. I think this is going to be a bit of a sorting of this MAGA pro-Trump movement. As this becomes more of a, commitment to potential real world violence. I mean, there's a lot of people who are living comfortable lives who, are somewhat political and may not be willing to, to risk all that for this movement.
Is there any idea of how large this population is?
It's very unclear what the actual footprint of this movement is. As far as, the true extremist community, I don't know how big it is. I do think it is louder online than it might be in the streets, but a very small fraction could still be, close to 100,000 people. And if those people are violent, that's a scary thing to consider.
What does the Biden administration do to try to tackle this?
There's talk of a Biden administration sort of disinformation head or chief, I think, working with task forces on, white supremacy and political violence. I think all those things are very good. But I also think, there's a fear among many civil liberties activists that this could also lead to some large overreach. It's kind of a scary time. I mean, this is we've seen a true threat spring up, and we haven't taken it seriously, and it needs to be taken more seriously. But the administration should really try to be careful to, not use that as a justification to impinge on the rights of innocent Americans.
Charlie Warzel, The New York Times. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
To hear more of our interview with Charlie Warzel, visit pbs.org/newshour. The rate of new COVID-19 infections continues to rise all across the globe today. According to the New York Times database, as of yesterday, the number of new cases around the world rose by 20% from 2 weeks ago, bringing total infections up to nearly 94 million and the death count to more than 2 million. The U.S. also has seen its number of new cases go up nearly 20% since 2 weeks ago. Yesterday, there were more than 240,000 new cases and more than 3,700 deaths. The situation is especially dire in California, which averaged more than 530 COVID-related deaths every single day over the past week. For more on the COVID-19 outbreak in California, I spoke with Soumya Karlamangala, health reporter for the Los Angeles Times. So Soumya, big picture, where is Los Angeles in terms of dealing with COVID-19?
Yeah, we're sort of in this holding pattern right now. We did see cases kind of climb and climb and climb, and then everyone was really worried about what was going to happen over Christmas and New Year's. And so far, we haven't seen a really obvious surge. And while we haven't seen cases begin to drop, we are seeing a lower number of people in the hospital each day, which seems like the Thanksgiving surge is dying down. And whatever we are going to see from Christmas, it seems every single day it gets a little bit clearer that this surge, if it even is a surge, is going to be blunted.
So what is the situation in hospitals now? Are they still at full capacity?
Yeah, it's kind of alarming that this has become normal, but we have about, I think, 7,600 people in the hospital in LA County with COVID. And in the summer, which, that was our big peak, everyone was worried about what was happening in California in July, we had 2,200. And there are many hospitals where there are no ICU beds available. So we've gotten into this situation over the past several weeks where someone calls 911, they get in an ambulance, and then the ambulance drives around for hours looking for a place to drop off the patient. There was a report from the county health department this week that said that there was at least one ambulance that couldn't find a place to offload their patient for 17 hours.
Oh my gosh.
And in that situation, you have people, paramedics, like doing CPR in the ambulance, doing procedures in the ambulance. You have doctors like coming into the ambulance to do whatever they need to do. And so we are, as the officials say, decompressing a little bit. Our numbers are coming down, but we're still at, I think our peak was 7,900 or maybe even above 8,000, and now we're at 7,500. So it's not, we haven't escaped this situation quite yet.
So the hospitals are sending the ambulances away because they're too full. That's why the ambulances are driving around?
If a hospital is full and their ER doesn't have any more space, they'll sort of mark in the system, like, we're full, you can't come here. And it got to a place in December where for multiple hours in a day, every single hospital was full. And so what happens when every single hospital is full, the ambulances circle, and at some point, the officials like to say this, when everyone is closed, everyone is open. And so ambulances are either circling or they're just offloading them in places they shouldn't be offloaded because they have no other choice.
Are there specific populations that are being impacted worse than others?
Yeah, we've seen this throughout the pandemic, but interestingly, the disparities that we see get wider when the cases surge. So we've consistently seen higher rates of cases and deaths among Latinos proportionally. So it's not just that California and LA in particular is a plurality, if not majority, Latinos. We're actually seeing the rates of those cases being much higher among Latinos, and that's largely because they're essential workers. They might live in multi-generational households. And then we see it track very similarly with poverty levels. The sort of lower your socioeconomic status, the more likely you are to have gotten COVID and more likely you are to have died from COVID.
How is this impacting vaccinations?
Yeah, California has really struggled with vaccinations. We rank in the bottom 5 states in terms of the percentage of our population that we vaccinated nationwide. There are states that have vaccinated upwards of 5% of their population, and we're still hovering around 1 or 2%. And that it sort of cuts both ways. I mean, we are vaccinating more people, just raw numbers of people, than anyone else because the state is so big. But that also means that there are huge numbers of people who aren't vaccinated and a lot of people still susceptible to fuel an outbreak. So we're going really slow, and that's something we've been trying to look into. We have reporters on this issue, and it seems like there's various bottlenecks, but it largely comes down to staffing. The people who need to administer a vaccine, it's like the systems haven't been stood up properly, and also the people who would be administering a vaccine are also often the people who are treating COVID patients in the hospital. So California is probably one of the states that needs a vaccine the most because we are dealing with this terrible surge, but we're also one of the states having the hardest time administering the vaccine because of our terrible surge.
Soumya Karlamangala of the LA Times, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Last week's riot on Capitol Hill was filled with symbols of hate. NewsHour Weekend's Yvette Feliciano spoke with civil rights lawyer and founder of the Equal Justice Initiative, Bryan Stevenson, about the racial implications of the violent event.
Bryan, some of what we saw at the Capitol riot last week includes what for many are very painful images: nooses, Confederate flags, violent threats written on the walls of the Capitol building. How do violent demonstrations like this impact communities of color, specifically Black communities?
Well, I think it is particularly upsetting to African Americans who have witnessed very different responses to protests throughout our lives. I grew up watching civil rights leaders who were committed to nonviolence peacefully gathering and still get battered and beaten by law enforcement. There was a presumption of dangerousness assigned to Black and brown people that would manifest itself during civil rights demonstrations. And, Black folks would put on their Sunday best. They would try everything they could to present themselves as nonviolent, non-threatening, just seeking basic rights. And still they would get battered and beaten and bloodied. So it's very hard to then watch people who are armed, who are talking about violence, who are coming with weapons, who are coming with nooses, be trusted in the way that these protesters were. There was a presumption of innocence assigned to the people in Washington last week, which made that so challenging for us. I remember seeing Amelia Boynton Robinson, a middle-aged Black woman, beaten unconscious on the Evan Pettus Bridge. I grew up watching people like John Lewis get beaten and bloodied and battered. And it was by law enforcement. And that kind of the challenge of that memory with what we saw is really part of it. And it does reflect the problem that many of us deal with in this country and communities of color, which is what it's like to live in a nation where you are presumed dangerous, where your color, your race creates this presumption of guilt.
Obviously, there's a long history of Black churches and communities existing under the threat of white supremacist attacks and violence. Is there a heightened sense of danger in those communities right now?
I think there is. I mean, I think you're right that activism for equality and justice has always been met. I live in Montgomery, Alabama, where we've seen church bombings, where we've seen that history play out. And so when people who are espousing these views of racial animus and bigotry and using the symbols of resistance equality to equality, like the Confederate flag, arm themselves and start roaming, people of color feel especially targeted, feel especially vulnerable. But the flip side to that is that we have grown up, many of us, aware, unintimidated, and unafraid. We are committed to the kind of equality and justice that we were promised.
And since the riots last week and Trump's impeachment this week, there have been numerous calls for unity and understanding. Where does accountability fit in that? But also, what do healing and unity look like for people who have felt directly targeted by white supremacists and by the Trump administration in the last 4 years?
I really think that we have to understand that we cannot be casual or indifferent to threats of violence, to calls for racial hierarchy and bigotry. We've learned throughout our history that when we tolerate the kind of violent mob violence that we saw in Washington, we are all at risk. It's an appeal to the lawlessness that shaped the lynching era. And so if we understand that era, then I think we understand how vigilant it is that there be accountability, that we actually commit to the kind of security and promise of fairness that we talk about. On the other side of that, we have these long-standing issues that we haven't addressed, and we have to address those issues. I mean, the reason why so many people feel threatened in this moment is because they actually fear that we might do better when it comes to racial equality, that we might do better when it comes to gender equality, we might do better in terms of inclusion and diversity. And some folks are threatened by that. And what we have to persuade people is that not only should they not be threatened by that, they should be excited by that. Because a true commitment to human rights and equal justice, a true America requires that. It's not an option, it requires that. And that's the hope we have to share.
Brian Stevenson, founder and executive director of the Equal Justice Initiative, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
That's all for this edition of PBS NewsHour Weekend. For the latest news updates, visit pbs.org/newshour. I'm Hari Srinivasan. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and have a good night.
PBS NewsHour Weekend is made possible by Sue and Edgar Wachenheim III, the Anderson Family Fund, Bernard and Denise Schwartz, the Cheryl and Philip Milstein family, Barbara Hope Zuckerberg, the Leonard and Norma Clorfine Foundation, Charles Rosenblum. We try to live in the moment to not miss what's right in front of us. At Mutual of America, we believe taking care of tomorrow can help you make the most of today. Mutual of America Financial Group, retirement services and investments. Additional support has been provided by Consumer Cellular and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people. And by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.